Glad you are here. Uh, Sorry to interrupt the fellowship, but we need to get going. And boy, so I'm going to tell you right now. I know we're running late, and we've got all that going. And the clock in the back that I look at is completely off. I don't know what happened to it. It says it's only 10 o'clock. So, but we're going to get started. Let me ask you to turn to Proverbs chapter 9 as we get started this morning. My name is Larry Klutz, by the way, for those of you who don't know me. So if you will turn to Proverbs 9, we will start there this morning before we look at some specific proverbs on friendship this morning. Scott started this series a few weeks ago by introducing that Solomon wrote this. Solomon and the other scribes starts out by contrasting this between two women, one of which he named wisdom and one in which he named folly. And Scott started with a couple of illustrations of these queens of playing cards. Tell me the difference in similarities that you see. They both have influence. Both have two eyes. Yeah, I did. I didn't think about. I know there's one-eyed jacks. Are there one-eyed queens too? I don't know. I'm not that much of a card player. I've noticed that. Their dress is different, and yet kind of the same motif. Yeah. One's black, one's red. Okay. Yeah. So, which one is wisdom and which one is folly? They, I don't know. I went back and looked at Scott's lesson. In fact, he sent me the slides because I wanted to pull some. And went, okay, I know which one he used as wisdom for his illustrations, but I'm looking at this going, how do I tell the difference?
The one on the right looks like she's got some kind of staff that means authority.
Okay. The spades? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. Is it wisdom and folly or folly and wisdom? You know? Okay. And so which one is which? The wisdom is smiling a little bit. Okay. Yeah. No. And I don't know that the answer to that question actually matters. But as I was preparing for this, the first 9 chapters of Proverbs is a section together where they are comparing and contrasting the woman of wisdom and the woman of folly. And doing that, let me point out in chapter 9, there is this phrase. Both of them are calling out to the people in the city, whoever is simple, let him turn in here. To him who lacks sense, she says. The problem with that phrase, both women use that phrase. Wisdom says it in chapter 9, verse 4. Folly says it in 9, verse 16. There's not a difference initially in wisdom and folly. They say the same. Sometimes they will even look the same. Different, but not strikingly different. How do I tell the difference between wisdom and folly?
Jesus said
Okay,
Whatever comes out of the decisions that are made is the fruit of that.
okay. So it's not in the initial offering or the initial words that a lot of times we can figure out which is which. We have to look at what happens long term. If I'm not putting words in your mouth. Look at the first several verses of chapter 9. Wisdom is from verses 1 through 12 and 9. Tell me some characteristics of wisdom. What does it describe there?
What were those verses again? I'm sorry.
Chapter 9, verses 1 through 12. What are some of those words that are descriptive of wisdom? Plans ahead.
Open to instruction and criticism. I use that correction.
Open to correction, open to hearing. Okay. Generous. What is the food and wine? What is the source of the food and the wine that she offers to those who are simple that turn in? What does she say? It's hers. Come eat of my bread. Come drink of the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways. She has prepared a banquet. And then she even offers in this, verses 7 through 12, even offers a sample of the wisdom that she offers. So the rest of the chapter, verses 13 through the end, folly makes her offer. What are some of the words that describes folly? Loud and undisciplined.
Sitting at the door of a house to be seen.
Likes to be seen. Mm-hmm.
Water is stolen. Food is eaten in secret. Probably because it's stolen.
Yeah. It's not stuff that she has prepared, is it? She says, oh, but if you don't work for it, if it comes, if you steal it, she hasn't prepared this, she has stolen this. Oh, that even makes it taste better, right? I mean, cookies are good, but if you can sneak it out of the cookie jar, does that make it taste better? Oops. Unless you get caught, you know. But what he says is, when you look down the road, when you look at people that do things that are wise, they have a long life, wealth, and honor, and people look up to them. But when you look at people who live a life of folly and chase after that, the stolen water, death is there. Death is there. But initially, it's hard to tell the difference sometimes. Hence, let's collect some proverbs to give us wisdom. Let me ask you another question. Does wisdom require a knowledge of evil?
You know the right way, you know what the wrong way looks like.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe not knowledge, but observation. You don't have to have been in it, but if you can observe it, you know it.
Okay. Okay. You don't have to necessarily live it or experience it, but you can observe it. and have knowledge that way.
The beginning of wisdom is to fear God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that was what we did a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. Yeah. The awe, the awe of God is the beginning of wisdom. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes wisdom comes from the falling.
Pardon?
Sometimes the wisdom comes from the falling.
Okay, sometimes wisdom comes from the falling. Mm-hmm. Glenn?
When Jesus is talking to his disciples in Matthew 10:16, he says, "Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and as innocent as doves."
Mm-hmm. So when Jesus sends people out, if you can't hear, he says, Jesus told his disciples to be as wise as serpents, but as innocent as doves. The thought occurred, yes, Barbara.
The word that comes to mind is discernment.
Discernment, uh-huh. I got to thinking, not sure where John went to. John's always wanting to go back to the garden. Everything you learn, everything you need to know is not in kindergarten, but it's in the Garden of Eden. When Adam and Eve ate of the tree, they ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And what enticed Eve specifically, it says, is she saw that it was desirable for the gaining of wisdom. Now, I will come back to part of what Debbie said. One of the things I think I mentioned in a few weeks ago when Scott was asking, one of the things I tried to teach my children, sayings I tried to give to them was, experience is really the only teacher, but it doesn't have to be your own. You know, you can learn from others' experience, you know, and learn some good things. So, like I said, a couple of weeks ago, the starting point for wisdom is the fear or the awe of the Lord. Last week, the wisdom in avoiding gossip. Thank you, Paul, for slander or talking too much when you use your phone. This week, we're going to talk about the wisdom of accumulating friends. So let me ask you another question. This is audience participation. I like this. Define friend for me. What is a friend? And how do we use that word? And what's the difference sometimes between, when we use that, between friend or good friend or best friend or companion or neighbor? You know, we kind of throw all those words. How do you define friend? What makes a friend?
Friend is a person you can confide in and you can trust and you reciprocate love to each other.
Okay, you
It's a reciprocal and they don't mean you any harm.
okay. You confide in them, they confide in you. It's reciprocal. You trust them, and there's a back and forth there. Okay. What else?
A friend makes a burden lighter.
Say again.
Friend makes a burden lighter.
A friend shares your burdens, makes a burden lighter. Okay.
Friend is there in good times and in bad times.
Good times and bad times. Okay.
And a person that's gonna always be there for you, even if you're wrong, they're still gonna be your friend. They're gonna tell you that you're wrong, but if they're truly your friend, they're still gonna be your friend.
Okay. They're your friend even when you're wrong, but they're going to tell you that you're wrong. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Somebody said they've got your back. Yeah.
They tell you the truth.
They tell you the truth. Chosen family. I like that. I like that a lot because there is a couple that we came to know that became our really, really good friends. And I have a sister, and my wife is an only child. And so when our daughter got to be 10, 11 years old, as I recall, they start figuring out family connections. And they realize that aunts and uncles are your parents' brothers and sisters. And so our sister, my daughter goes, okay, so Aunt Denise and Uncle Wayne is your sister, yes. And Mom does not have any brothers and sisters, right? And all of a sudden, tears started welling up in her eye. I mean, big alligator tears. What about Uncle Stormy and Aunt Casey? You know, because that's all she'd known them by, and that's what they were. And, well, they're not really family. What do you mean they're not family? You know, I mean, that's just wrong. And, well, they're not blood relatives, and thinking fast on my feet. They're family by choice. They're chosen family. She said, but they're family. And I said, yes, they are. They are, and they still are. Chosen family. You know? So I like that. Anything else you'd like to add? Well, as I dug into this, in a lot of these phrases, these proverbs, the Hebrew word that is used is reah. And it means an associate. This is Strong's definition. An associate who is more or less a close associate. I mean, it's not defining it as only a best friend, but is a close associate, somebody who is close to you. Interestingly enough, in the Bible, this word reah is translated 102 times as neighbor and 40 some odd times as friend, and other words as well. Sometimes just man. In the book of Proverbs, it occurs about 30 different verses, 21 verses as neighbor, 7 verses as friend. And even when it's translated as neighbor, it means somebody who is close to you emotionally. They have a different word that we're going to run across that means neighbor who is close to you physically, but not emotionally. Somebody that lives close, but is not close. That word is shakain in Hebrew. So when we read through these verses, we're going to be talking about friends, but sometimes it's going to come across in the translations as neighbor. I don't know what translation you are using. I'm going to put up translations out of the English Standard Version. But when you look at, if you've got one of those Bible apps that you can look at a verse and then look at all the different translations, when you look through those different translations and they have different English words there, it's because it is, you're looking at the Old Testament, it is a Hebrew word that just doesn't quite cross over the same into English. I mean, I don't know about you. I think I've mentioned it here before. I thought a foreign language was different sounds for the same word. And it's not. It is different way of thinking. And so what Solomon is trying to express in Hebrew, when we try and cross that over into English, sometimes a word in Hebrew has to become a phrase in English. And sometimes to get across the concept and the way he was meaning it then, we're going to use one English word or a different English word. And even that will change over time. if you go back and find an old King James Version, I mean, like one written in the 17 or 1800s, it's different than the one that was actually written in 1611. And I know that because I had a friend one time, many years ago, preached a sermon on the word wist. They wist not. And it was in an old King James Version Bible that he had, and it wasn't in my King James Version. You know? So our English language changes, and so I don't know what translation you're using, but let's look at some things that sometimes are hard to cross over. Here's one of the proverbs about friendship. Do not forsake your friend and your father's friend. Do not go to your brother's house in the day of your calamity. Better is a neighbor who is near than a brother who is far away. I color-coded some words in there. I'm not sure how well they show up. Friend. Friend here is that word rhea, which is Strong's word H7453, and it means that person who is an associate more or less close. Brother here is a word that means a brother in the widest sense possible. We often use that as brethren, not just genetic relation. Okay? Neighbor here is that word shakain, which is a resident, a fellow citizen, but not necessarily somebody that's emotionally close. So what's going on in this verse? Do not forsake your friend and your father's friend. Do not go to your brother's house in the day of calamity. Better is a neighbor who is near than a brother who is far away. What's going on there?
I think it's interesting, read studies, one of the most profound influences on friendship is proximity.
Okay.
It's the amount of time you spend with somebody and how far you live from that person, especially true in this time, of course. So, I don't know how that plays into this, besides, if you have somebody if you have somebody who is in close proximity to you, then choose them for, the day of calamity, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. He's saying that a lot of the studies on how friends happen is proximity in time and in space. That you're people that you spend with. That's how you become friends. Common experience. Okay. So one of the things I think is happening in this verse is there is a calamity. What's a calamity? Bad thing. Not normal. A disaster. Okay? So, is it hard to help people? Can be. It's a disruption, isn't it? Well, I can tell you I retired in September of 2020. October of 2020 was the big ice storm, and all the tree limbs came down. And I spent like the first week and a half or 2 weeks with a chainsaw in my hand. About 4 days in, I came into Angie, I said, if this is retirement, I'm going back to work. This is hard. There's a calamity going on, and if your friend or your father's friend has had calamity, do not forsake them.
Well, if we're talking about books of wisdom here, I do think there's a lot of wisdom here, and here's why. And this is going to take me a minute, so I apologize. So my kids plays video games online with people from all around the world, the United States, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he calls And I think that you find that here, like wisdom
Mm-hmm.
says, wisdom says, find people who are close to you and like, and get them in your life because you want to depend on someone, who's in proximity with you, and it could be, like a proximity as far as like going after the same thing, like we're in proximity with our friendship because we're going after the same thing here at Oakdale. I mean, you come to Oakdale, I come to Oakdale, we both want to be Jesus followers. Better for me to go to your house than, my guys in Arkansas where I came from.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're a better person to call on in my calamity than somebody far, far away.
Yeah. There, especially in our culture now, in our time, and maybe more so for our kids and grandkids, it's easy to know what's going on in somebody else's life halfway around the world and to stay in touch halfway around the world. It's amazing. A week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago, my grandson in Kansas City called up my wife and invited her to play an online game of checkers with him. And they played checkers, long distance, which was fantastic, But if he skins his knee, she can't help. You know, don't forsake your friends or your father's friends or friends of your family in a day of calamity. But at the same time, in your day of calamity, somebody who is emotionally close to you that is a long ways away is no help. Better is somebody that is close. So, who is your neighbor? Does that question sound familiar to you in a church setting? Well, Luke chapter 10. There's a lawyer. Amazing. Even back then, apparently lawyers argued over what words actually mean. I have a friend who was a lawyer, and he said when he took contract law, his professor told him, said, I'm going to tell you, these are his words, he says, I'm going to tell you in the first 5 minutes of class everything you need to know about contract law. He says, here it is. He goes, I'm going to tell you, it's going to be 5 minutes long, and we're going to spend the rest of the semester figuring out what that means. And according to the guy, what this guy said was, if the contract doesn't say what your client wants it to say, read it again. And if it still doesn't say what your client wants it to say, read it again and keep reading it until it says what your client wants it to say. And he says, that's right. We spent the rest of the semester figuring out what that means and how to do it. So this lawyer comes to Jesus and says, okay, yeah, I love my neighbor. That's Leviticus 19. Actually, Leviticus 19:18. The verse says completely, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. That's it. This is who I am. This is my rule. Do not take vengeance on your family, on your, but love the one who is, and that word there is Rhea, an associate who is emotionally close to you. So the lawyer says, well, who is my brother? And Jesus tells the parable of the Good Samaritan. You know that one, right? And who is the neighbor to the wounded man? The least likely candidate. Who's in proximity, yeah. Who crosses your path that needs your help?
I think the lesson of it was, to whom can I become a neighbor?
To whom can I become a neighbor? Yeah. Jesus essentially redefines this Hebrew word being an associate, not just somebody who's emotionally close to you, but who needs your help, who can use your help. I just found it interesting that that word neighbor is often translated as friend and vice versa. Love your neighbor. On a side note, as you probably noticed, but I don't think I've heard it said yet, some of these proverbs are saying the same thing from two different perspectives or using different words to say the same thing. I'm not sure what they actually call that, but do you understand what I'm trying to say? And then other proverbs are this, not that. Have you ever had to explain that to somebody? This is what I want, not that. Angie sent me for carrots the other day. She said, I'm going to put on a stew. I want some carrots. I don't want those little baby-shaped carrots that are all the same. Those don't cook well. I want, honest to goodness, old-style carrots that you have to peel yourself. And all. And I'm like, okay. It was this, not that. Only had to go to 2 stores to find this and not that. So sometimes you'll find that this is one of those. I'm going to ask you how you put that in. That's Leviticus 19. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Is that 2 ways of looking at the same thing, or this, not that? Two ways of saying the same thing. Yeah. Friend there is our word raya. Brother is coming back to that word that is the widest sense of brotherhood. There's not just genetic, but a connection. What some of you had said earlier, how do you define a friend? Somebody that loves you all the time, no matter what. And a friend that is for adversity. It's interesting here, this word, I've colored in red there, loves. It is a word that means to have affection for somebody, and it's often translated as love. Most of the time it's translated as love, but oftentimes it finds itself translated as friend. In this verse, Proverbs 27:6, faithful are the wounds of a friend. It's that word that means love. Faithful are the wounds of a friend who loves you, or somebody who loves you. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. What's going on there? 2 different ways of looking at the same thing, or this, not that? That's a this, not that. Yeah. What do you get out of that verse?
The enemy is lying and the friend is telling the truth.
Okay. The enemy is lying, the friend is telling the truth.
We said this earlier, and I thought of this first, but someone who doesn't love you tells you what they think you want to hear, but a friend will tell you what you need to know.
Okay. Glenn's saying a friend will tell you what you need to know, an enemy tell you what they think you want to hear. Sincerity. Yeah. Jacob?
Judas kissed Jesus, and Jesus told him you should have never been born.
Jacob says, Judas kisses Jesus, and Jesus says it'd been better if you hadn't been born. Yes, David.
I'm kind of looking at it a little bit differently. The first part of that verse that says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. It's like, I'd rather have faithful are the wounds of a friend than kisses of an enemy.
Yeah,
That's how I'm seeing it.
a little different. I like, that's a little bit different perspective, but I like that. I would rather have a wound from a friend than a kiss from an enemy. Yeah.
In the New Living Translation, it breaks it down a little clearer. I think it says, wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy.
Yeah, that's good. And that picks up on some of the differences in the Hebrew words, trying to bring that across of a sincere friend. Yeah. Time? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Do it. Okay. Something very, very, very. Let me do this very quick, and I'll just end it here and leave it with this question for you to think about. Last week in his communion talk, Isaac talked about Nathan, the prophet Nathan, coming to David and confronting him about his sin with Uriah and Bathsheba. Was Nathan a friend or an enemy? He was a friend. It hurt, but it was a friend. I know he was a friend because David named one of his sons Nathan. You don't name your kids after somebody that's an enemy. Appreciate your conversation, appreciate your help. Go collect kids or grandkids and see you next week.